Hello, I'm Michael Ferragamo. Today, we're located at Kings Beach in Lynn, Massachusetts, where roughly 30 years ago, in August 1991, a storm of unprecedented strength roared through southern New England, tracking just offshore this beautiful town. Today, we're talking none other than Hurricane Bob. To understand the story of this storm so foreign to our region, we must track it all the way back to August 15, 1991.
Early on the 15th of August, 1991, an area of low pressure appeared well northeast of the Bahamas. Through the day of the 15th, the area looked very disorganized. However, an aircraft mission was sent into the disturbance and found a closed circulation, meaning a center to the storm, along with flight level winds of 37 miles per hour. The disturbance was then labeled a tropical depression only hours later. Roughly 18 hours after being declared a tropical depression, the National Hurricane Center upgraded it to a tropical storm, giving it the name Bob. Throughout the day of August 16th, Bob began to become more organized and an aircraft was sent into the storm, which recorded hurricane-force winds. Following this reading, the Hurricane Center upgraded the storm to a Category 1 hurricane. Shortly after this upgrade, the hurricane began to turn towards the northeast, now paralleling the U.S. East Coast due to a dip in the jet stream, known as a trough. Bob then becomes a Category 2 hurricane.
It was then that meteorologists began to realize that Hurricane Bob could very well track over this region. As a result, preparations went underway in southern New England. Longtime residents, however, have seen storms like this before, and they are no stranger to tropical cyclones.
America, thanks to ample warning by the Weather Bureau, New York and New England were ready for the hurricane codenamed Edna, the second big storm to lash the Atlantic seaboard in 12 days.
Hurricanes Edna and Carol both struck this region 11 days apart back in 1954, causing a combined total of almost $1 billion in damage. However, Bob, in just a few days, was about to make history of its own. Shortly after Bob's upgrade to a hurricane, hurricane watches were issued for the North Carolina and Virginia coastline, and roughly 4 hours after that, the watch was upgraded to a hurricane warning. As Hurricane Bob continued paralleling the U.S. East Coast, a new hurricane watch was later issued on August 17th, encompassing areas from Virginia, north into Delaware, and into southern New Jersey. That same day, Hurricane Bob made its closest approach to land yet, brushing the outer banks of North Carolina, bringing hurricane-force winds and heavy rains. A few brief tornadoes also touched down in the state within the outer rain bands of Bob. High waves caused minimal beach erosion and overwash along the coastline. Late on August 18th, as Hurricane Bob was pulling away from the Outer Banks, a new, extremely rare hurricane warning was issued for coastal southern New England for one of the first times ever. This was prompted by forecasts showing Bob moving directly over southern New England. The new warning now covered an area between Cape Henlopen, Delaware, to Bar Harbor, Maine.
Late on August 18, 1991, it was clear that Hurricane Bob had its sights set on southern New England. The hurricane was about to make one devastating landfall on our region, one we haven't seen in almost half a century. Despite all the evidence pointing to a direct hurricane strike, however, experienced harbor masters and sailors saw no reason to panic. Besides, their boats were safe in the harbor, weren't they?
Early the next day, on August 19, 1991, hurricane warnings were extended northward to Eastport, Maine. The Canadian Hurricane Center also began issuing warnings for Atlantic Canada. It was now a guarantee that in just a few hours from now, Hurricane Bob was going to roar ashore somewhere along the southern New England coastline. Hurricane Bob at this time was peaking in strength, achieving 1-minute sustained winds of 115 miles per hour and a pressure of 950 millibars. Bob was now a Category 3 major hurricane.
Hurricane Bob is expected to hit the Cape early this afternoon. It's being described as a dangerous storm with winds in excess of 110 miles an hour.
Heading towards Narragansett Bay and Buzzards Bay, and within a few hours it should be making itself felt on the Cape and the islands.
The Hamptons.
And the people up there remember Hurricane Carol. This is probably more like Carol than any of the rest. It's as strong, I think, as the 1938 hurricane. It's coming in pretty near where Hurricane Carol came in 1954.
Thank you, John.
Officials in Connecticut and Rhode Island declared a state of emergency in anticipation of significant damage. All state workers in the area were told to go home early and prepare for the storm. In Massachusetts, thousands of residents evacuated Cape Cod, leading to an 11-mile backup on Sagamore Bridge. On Martha's Vineyard, electronic stores reported their best sales in years, with supplies of batteries being wiped clean off the shelves. The president at the time, George H.W. Bush, was staying at his home in Kennebunkport, Maine, right in the path of the hurricane. The Secret Service immediately evacuated him to Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. On the morning of August 19, 1991, Bob's tropical storm force winds were beginning to be felt across southern New England. Hurricane force winds were also just hours away from making their way on shore.
Hurricane Bob was on its final approach. Time for preparation in southern New England has run out. The storm was here.
Early on August 19th, the core of Hurricane Bob passed directly over Block Island. Stations on the island recorded sustained winds of 105 miles per hour near the low end of their range, indicating that the winds were likely much stronger.
You have an overhead traffic light hanging just by the wire only. That's what I need. We need attention if that falls on somebody. You got problems.
I just heard on the police transmission they are sending all units back to their respective...
90-mile-per-hour winds rake coastal towns like Narragansett and Newport, accompanied by a storm surge of 5 to 8 feet, which inundated coastal communities. A storm surge of 6.6 feet, levels not seen by a storm in decades, inundated parts of Rhode Island's capital city, Providence. But the damage was far from over. Winds from Bob were not as strong as they were at landfall, but still well above hurricane force. A station in Buzzards Bay recorded 1-minute sustained winds of 77 miles per hour, along with a gust to 89. Sustained winds of 100 miles per hour were recorded in Providencetown, as well as a report of a gust to 125 miles per hour in Brewster. Storm surge continued to batter the coastline and was most significant along Buzzards Bay, peaking at 5.8 feet in New Bedford and Woods Hole. This, and a combination of extremely strong winds, were enough to cause damage totals unheard of in New England. As Bob tracked just offshore Cape Ann and emerged over the Gulf of Maine, it weakened back into a tropical storm. Even though weaker, Bob still maintained strong winds. A few hours later, early on August 20th, Bob reached the coastline of Maine, producing gusts of 70 miles per hour in Portland, as well as dumping over 8 inches of rain. A station in Wiscasset, Maine also reported a gust of 92 miles per hour before it was blown away. Most of the damage from Hurricane Bob was caused in New England, however minor damage was also reported in the Carolinas. As Hurricane Bob struck New England on August 19th, wind and rain were not the only factors contributing to destruction. High waves eroded the beach around Chatham Light, leaving behind a 5-foot cliff. Other locations, including southward-facing beaches along Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, lost 50 feet of beach from erosion. Boat damage was also significant in the region. The hurricane left over 500,000 people without power, including all of Cape Cod. In Rhode Island, about 200,000 power outages were reported, and roughly 60% of residents in southeastern Massachusetts were left without power. Damage was heaviest, however, from Buzzards Bay eastward, and at least 61 homes were destroyed. The state in total suffered roughly $70 million in damage to public property. Although moving across Maine as a tropical storm, the heaviest rainfall nationwide from the hurricane fell at Portland International Jetport, where over 8 inches of rain fell during its passage. This contributed to August 1991 being the wettest month on record in Portland. A total of 700 houses were affected by the storm, including 1 that was destroyed and 3 that sustained major damage.
There is no doubt that Hurricane Bob was a very destructive storm in New England, as it goes down as the most costliest in New England history. However, there's a storm that puts Hurricane Bob to shame for its power. A storm so great that damage was visible over 20 years later. That's the Great New England Hurricane of 1938. I'm Michael Ferragamo. We'll see you next time.